What was your reaction when you first heard Carry On Wayward Son or Dust in the Wind? Or maybe you were one of the lucky ones that got Kansas before Left Overture. There was a lot of great music before that. But the lead singer was Steve Walsh. And man, that guy found his own lane. We talked to members of Kansas about Steve Walsh, who was with them from 73 to 81, and again from 85 to 2014. Just like Steve Perry will always be really the voice of Journey, even though we love Arnel Pineda and he's doing a great job. Brad Delp will always be the voice of Boston, even though we lost him quite a few years ago. Steve Walsh, he's the man. And again, Ronnie Platt, the current lead singer of Kansas, I love this man. He's an amazing dude and a very friendly guy. He talks about Steve Walsh, and so do other members of Kansas on Rock History Music. Steve Walsh was born June 15, 1951 in St. Louis, Missouri. Of course, he's best known as the lead singer and keyboardist for one of the greatest progressive rock bands of all time, Kansas. He co-founded the band in 1973, handing out major contributions to the band, helping create that unique, distinctive sound with his powerful tenor vocals. And the best-known song for Kansas is, of course, Carry On Wayward Son, followed by Dust in the Wind. He was really an integral part of the big albums for Kansas: Left Overture, Monolith, Point of No Return. He left Kansas in 1981 but came back in 85 and left in 2014. He was on all the Kansas releases from the debut in 74 to Audio Visions in 1980 and then Power in 86 to There's No Place Like Home in 2009. When great lead singers are mentioned, Paul Rodgers, Steve Perry, Bradley Delp, Steve Walsh is always in that conversation as well. To you, though, if I was going to ask you, Steve Walsh is, well, how would you describe him?
Complicated. Uh, in my opinion, if not the greatest rock and roll singer of all time, in the top three. Um, beautiful, beautiful. You go back and listen to his first couple albums and the tone of his voice. And we didn't know that at the time. He was just a guy that, we'd heard him sing from St. Joe, and he got him in the band. And we were just in a workmanlike manner going about work. Then you hear him on tape. It's like, especially when we go back and listen now, which Phil and I do kind of often. Wow, I was listening to Journey from Marybrown the other day. Go back to the middle section, listen to Steve's voice there. We didn't know what we had at that time. It's really remarkable. Steve was smart, fun, funny, but also a bit distant at times.
Why do you think Steve Walsh was such the perfect singer for Kansas in his during his tenure?
Even the other members of Kansas, if you watch the documentary Miracles Out of Nowhere, they talk about, going to New York and recording that first album. And, everyone goes out to lunch or dinner or something, and Steve stays back to cut his vocals, and everyone comes back and it's like, oh my God, who the heck is this guy? Where did this guy come from? And I would have that same feeling, because, sure, they're playing all those maybe not the most exquisite bars in Kansas, where everything's live. Back then, everything was live. There was no such thing as in-ear monitors back then. Everything was floor monitors and Marshall stacks and, live drums that was really loud. So were you really hearing everything back then playing a bar that you would in the studio? Of course not. So imagine, the guys in Kansas going to record that first album and hearing Steve and just hearing that power and that range. And I have something for you to do. Put on the studio version of Dust in the Wind. And when it starts to fade, start turning up the volume and try to keep that level and listen to Steve's ad-libs during the fade out. It's amazing. And I wish I wish Jeff Glicksman, I wish he wouldn't have faded that out so quickly. I wish he would have let Dust in the Wind go a little bit longer, because Steve is in the stratosphere, clear as a bell, simply amazing. Give it a listen.
Why did he leave the first time?
Well, Dave and Kerry left the first time because they wanted to, they wanted to be a Christian band, and we didn't want to be one. And they thought they were going to be the Christian Beatles and save the world, which is a common notion of a fresh born again Christian. It's my job. More power to you. Steve's best was singing Kerry Livgren's songs, with the meaning and it really could. But Steve really wanted to be Paul Rogers. That was his hero. He wanted to sing rock songs. He wanted to be in that type of band. That's what he really enjoyed doing. And I don't think ever really came to grips at that time of the collaboration of Kerry's songs and his voice was a perfect thing. Kerry's never done that since. Steve's never done that since. You put them together, and that's where the magic happened.
It's like Elton John, Bernie Taupin, no one knows why, it just works.
Exactly. Crosby, Stills, Nash, Young. All of a sudden the blend of those three voices, and all of a sudden you had something that wasn't there with any of the two together, but with those three, kaboom, magic. And that happens sometimes. And in those rare moments, hold on to it as long as you can.
What got him back in the band? Why did he come back?
Well, he went off. Well, there's always the notion that I can do this. I can be a rocker. And these guys are holding me back. And so he went off to be, a rock star. And he put together a really good band with Mike Slamer and Billy Greer, Tim Garrett, who was a friend from Topeka. And tried, with a couple albums to do that, and went broke. It never really caught on. Meanwhile, Phil and I were told by the record company, we were owed like 4 records. And we had a meeting at the Hotel California with the big wig, and he just sat down and said, guys, give it up. You're done. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Your management doesn't care. Booking agents don't care. You have no fans, all this, And so we walked out of there with our asses handed to us. We didn't quit. We didn't give up, but we didn't have a team to put on the field either.
Right.
Steve was in streets, Kerry and Dave were gone. So we just kind of kept that under our hat, and we just waited. Well, streets eventually died. And meanwhile, Steve Morse, 3 times in the Guitar Player Hall of Fame and a legend, we were based out of Georgia. Steve was based out of Macon, just outside of Atlanta. And, he was a peer. He was a, part of the local music scene. And Phil just said, let's maybe try to get this started again. And so Phil approached Steve. What would you think about it? And Steve didn't have anything else to do. Sure, let's give it another shot, because his nemesis was Kerry. And Kerry wasn't around anymore because Steve didn't want to sing Kerry's songs anymore. Meanwhile, Dave Hope had kind of left with him. We need a bass player. Steve goes, well, Billy Greer, he's a great singer. He's with Streets. He's going to be looking for work. So cool, Billy's in. And then, let's talk to Steve Morris. He's a fan. And the Dregs have broken up. And boom, we had a band. And so like that, suddenly we were back with a working unit. And all of a sudden we're with the new record company, with MCA. And Kansas is now back. unfortunately, MCA, things weren't going well for that company. And finally, they had their Bloody Friday where they just slashed everything. And we died with it. And that was the end of that, because Steve Morse went on to Deep Purple. Mm-hmm. And we had to reinvent ourselves again. Then come the 90s when classic rock had fallen to its all-time low. And now we're slugging around in a bus, making 15 grand a night, playing little bars, Kansas and Jello Slide, but I can't imagine doing that now. But at the time, it was just like, of course we'll continue. Of course we'll keep doing this. Waiting for something to change. And Robbie came back. That was with David Ragsdale. Then Ragsdale left, and Robbie came back for a while. Then Robbie had to go, and Ragsdale's back.
Remember, comment on our videos, subscribe to our channel, share our videos, and like them as well. I'm John Bowden. You can help the channel by joining our Patreon, get early access to our videos. If you want to make a donation, there's a PayPal link. More from the guys in Kansas in the next few days. I'm John Bowden from Rock History Music. Take care of yourself.